I want to reach out from the...
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talk Now Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me tonight is going to be Denise Stoner and Kathleen Marden. And many of y'all are probably familiar with Kathleen. She is the niece of Benny and Barney Hill, who were abducted. I believe it was 1963, if memory serves. And she became a UFO, an alien abductee, researcher and investigator. And Denise Stone is also a MUFON investigator. And both women have got a lot of experience in this. And they've teamed up on a book. And we're going to talk to them about this here book tonight. And I want to apologize to everybody for the wrong intro. I accidentally hit the wrong button, so I just stopped the intro as it was getting started. So let's move this one along. Denise, Kathleen, how are you two doing tonight?
Doing fine, thank you.
Good to be with you.
It's good to have you back, Kathleen. And Denise, it's good to meet you and to have you on the show for the first time. And I hope this ain't going to be the only time. I'd like to see you come back like Kathleen on more than one occasion.
Oh, thank you.
Now, why don't we start this off by, we'll start one of y'all at a time here. And Kathleen, why don't we start with you? And you kind of give us an idea about what got you the idea of teaming up with Denise for this book.
Well, I had lived in New Hampshire before I moved to Florida 3.5 years ago. And I had a few email exchanges with Denise when I'd lived in New Hampshire. So when I came to Florida, I wanted to meet her and to attend some of her meetings. So I contacted her and I did that. And I was impressed by Denise, I have to tell you. She was very professional, very well-spoken. I liked the way she worked. And so we started to work together on some cases. And as we got to know each other, she eventually said to me that she was herself an abduction experiencer. Now, she wanted me to keep that a secret. This was confidential. She wasn't announcing it to anybody. And then I asked her if she'd ever had hypnosis. And she told me that she had gone to a Dr. Romack in Colorado after her first missing time event in 1982, but that she really couldn't remember what was said there. She remembered something about a black hole, and that was about it. And so I have a background in hypnosis. I'm a certified hypnotherapist, was up north in New Hampshire. And so I'm not in the business down here, but I told Denise that I would help her by facilitating her memory through hypnosis. And so she decided that she wanted to do that. So this is how this started. I was very interested. I ended up finding out that she had another missing time event with her husband, too, in Florida in 1991. This was almost unheard of, and she's having continuing experiences as well. So it's really a treat to have someone who's having this happen who lives nearby for the purpose of evidence collection. And Denise is a respected researcher and investigator herself, so she has the equipment. She knows how to collect evidence. So we were working on all of this, and I was slowly writing another book. I decided I really wanted to write a book on alien abduction. I had talked about doing another one with Stanton Friedman, but he thought that he was just going to be too busy, and we'd planned something out, and he then said, well, we better put this off. I just can't do it. And I wanted to write another book. I enjoy writing. And I enjoy working with another person when I do it. I had already planned what I wanted to do about the Jenny Henderson case. This was an investigation I did in New Hampshire for a number of years. Pretty outstanding case. And so in talking to Denise, I asked her if she would like to join me in telling her story in the book, and she was going to do so on an anonymous basis, but something changed. Our publisher insisted that either Denise or Jenny would go public with their identity or there would be no book. And Denise and I had been working for quite a while putting all of this together. Denise can fill you in on her side of the story on that, but it ended up that Jenny said that there was no way she could possibly go public. She comes from a well-known family in New Hampshire. Her husband's currently still in business, and Denise finally agreed to do it after much thought and talk.
Has she had any negative ramifications from this decision?
Well, Denise, why don't you take over from here and fill in on your side of the story?
All right. Well, so far, I have not, but I have questioned a couple of negative reactions to the book, but I would say only 2 or 3, and it was actually questioning why we went back to Betty and Barney in a couple of instances on the radio. Why did we do this? Why did we do that? Why did I say certain things that were some things that possibly were already known? But a story has to be built, and you have to start at point A and go to Z. Otherwise, others that have had experiences are not going to understand what's happened to them. But basically, all in all, I am feeling this is very, very positive. We're not getting the critics jumping out at us as they have in the past with some others. So I feel very blessed that this has happened.
I don't blame you.
I don't feel bad about it at all, and I feel that Kathleen probably feels the same. We just have not had to watch our backs, and I think
that's a big blessing, believe me.
Yes, so far it's a very good thing, and I think we're helping others who are out there searching for people that are scientific. They've done their investigations, they've done their research, and we have some things put together for those individuals that are still searching.
Yeah, that was one of the things I noticed in this here book when I was reading it, was that she laid out her research kind of like on a step-by-step basis. She was sharing her thoughts about what she was doing when she was documenting her reasons for anything she hesitated about. It was kind of like laying everything out like an open book for everybody so they can make a full judgment call with no information withheld.
That's exactly right. Yes. And Kathy, go ahead.
Yeah. When I was thinking about writing this book, many of the people who enjoy reading my books had come to me and said, why don't you write a book about abduction experiencers so that we'll all know what it feels like, what it's like to be an experiencer, how it is to live in an experiencer's shoes. So that's what I really attempted to do here. And of course, the research has to go into it, the investigation has to go into it, and all of those different elements, a discussion of hypnosis. Who am I? Well, of course I wrote about Betty and Barney because I'm their niece, and that's where I started out. So since it was the book was told in my voice, then I wanted to pull in all of these different elements to make it an interesting book, to make it readable, to make it exciting, so that it wouldn't just be a regular dry case investigation that people might become bored with when they were reading.
Right.
So I molded the book. I fashioned it that way to make it readable.
That's exactly right, and both of us totally agree that if we did not have the comparison of Betty and Barney with mine, people wouldn't see that this is an ongoing thing. And with Jenny, they can compare theirs with ours, with Betty and Barney, and see all of these things saying, oh my gosh, this has been going on for years. This isn't something that just happened to me and I have nothing to look at that can tell me, yes, some of those things are going on with me. And they happen to these people in the book, and the research has been done.
Right, like one of the common denominators that she made between you and Betty and Barney, as well as Jenny Henderson, was the fact that all of y'all had a lot to lose by coming forward and making this here information public. You had no reason to, in other words, make up a fanciful story, because it would do you a lot more harm than good.
Absolutely. And you know, a researcher, an investigator, a detective, how many times do they read a crime report looking for that one clue until they finally find it? So we could read these reports in this book for years, over and over and over again, perhaps find something that's been missing, and all of a sudden there it is. We never know.
That's also true. When you get books, especially like this one here, I always recommend that you stick it in the bookshelf after you read it, because when you start talking to other people, you might have a friend that you never knew had an experience come up to you one day and start sharing with you, and you might want to cross-reference and look for comparisons then, and if you don't say the book, you won't have it.
That's exactly
Great
right.
idea.
Yes, it can be used as a reference book on top of being a very enjoyable read.
Now, some of the things that I noticed that you, and I think it was Jenny, both had in common with your abductions was I want to call it an unusual way of actually entering the ship. It was almost as if matter was decomposing, you might say, to allow you to pass through it as you were going through it into the ship. Did I understand that description correctly?
Yes.
Well, yes, Kathleen, you go first, because it works well when you describe what you've discovered.
Okay.
All right.
I'll do that. Yes. I've always been very curious about this idea that a human body is passed through a solid surface on its way to the craft, and sometimes through the solid craft itself. That's been reported to me over and over again, and I've talked to hundreds of experiencers, and I've read just about all the books I can get my hands on the subject. My aunt Betty Hill always used to say, well, if somebody tells me that they've passed through a ceiling, I'm going to ask them how much it cost for the repair. And so she just didn't believe it. She said that it was impossible and all of that was nonsense. But I wanted to know if it was possible. And I'd gotten a little information from Jenny Henderson. It was something about vibrational frequency and the ETs wanting to change that. And I thought, gee, if this occurred just before she was being put back home, does it have something to do with her vibrational frequency? And I'm not talking woo-hoo or woo-woo stuff here. I'm talking about theoretical physics. And we know in physics that everything resonates at a certain vibrational level. So if you have a solid rock, for example, the vibrational frequency of that rock is slower than the vibrational frequency of a human body. But, so how would it even be possible? I asked 3 theoretical physicists about this. And I'm going to tell you, they all told me pretty much the same thing. But, one of them really laid it out to me in very common sense terms. And he told me that you have to remember that in an atomic structure, the atom is 99% empty between the protons and the electrons. So he said that if you can match up the frequency, this vibrational frequency at which this matter is moving, and the phase, then you can pass matter through matter. So a body will pass through a wall if they're all vibrating at the same frequency and all of those atoms are lined up. Well, it sounds pretty far-fetched, but he told me that this has been done on a very small scale in a physics laboratory. So it does make sense to me now. So I think that we might be on to something here. And Denise, why don't you continue with your story?
Yes, absolutely. It has to be something like that because I witnessed on several different occasions the underside of these crafts that I was going to enter, and I knew I was going to enter them, and I also knew I was not going to fit through the opening. There was no way. It wouldn't have mattered if I was a 5-year-old child. They were hourglass shaped. They were too narrow in the center. You could see that clearly. And I was told by the entity, by the guide, to step into a particular area. And we're kind of keeping this to ourselves right now, what was I stepped into, because we want to see how many others come forward with it. But I stepped in as directed, and when I did, I felt myself coming apart virtually. It's the only way I could describe it. I felt like I was coming apart, particle by particle. I could not find myself yet. I knew I was still me, and it was very extremely painful. And I felt all the particles and pieces moving upward until finally I was whole, standing in the hallway of the craft.
Wow, that does sound kind of so like something I wouldn't want to experience. Real quick, like before we go any further, I want to remind everybody that you can learn more by going to www.denisestoner.com, DeniseMstoner.com, or www.Kathleen-Marden.com. And they both have a new questionnaire up on the website. If y'all want to take the, fill out the questionnaire, it'll give you a better idea of maybe you've been abducted. And, ladies, am I correct that maybe some people have been abducted that are not aware they've been abducted until after they take this test?
That can happen, and it might bring forth some memory or some familiarity with some things that have happened to them. And even if they don't relate to every single question, fill out what they do know.
Okay.
And, the questions on this test or on this questionnaire are not necessarily questions that pertain to abduction experiencers. We don't know for sure if they do or not, except for on the questions such as what type of entity did you observe, then we know that that is it. But when it comes to medical questions, then we really don't know if there's any commonality there or not. It's research that we're doing in order to discover the answers. And I have to tell you, on our first questionnaire, which has been completed, and the research report is on my website. You can go there and you can read it. We also had a control group. We had 50 experiencers, and we had a 25-person control group. And I do believe that 2 of the individuals in that control group might very well be experiencers because they had almost nothing in common with the control group, and they had almost everything in common with
each other.
The experiences. Yes, they did. And certainly I wouldn't tell them that. That's something they'd have to discover on their own, but it was pretty shocking to see that.
Okay. Now, I also want to mention to everybody that we do have a call-in number. It's 832-632-7904. Feel free to call in and ask questions. Alternatively, if you want to, you can stop by www.talknowradio.com. Join the site. The membership's free. It'll let you into the chat room, and you can chat with everybody and pop questions into the chat room, and I'll read them, and I'll read them out loud to the guests. Now, that was one of the things I was picking up on when I was reading your book, is the different forms of technology. And I believe I remembered this is something that Jenny described, and if I remember correctly, I think Denise did as well, as being taken into a section of the ship where there were like glass tubes filled with some kind of liquid that had babies or growing babies or fetuses in them. It was kind of like liquid that you could be in. You could still breathe. Is my memory on this still correct?
Yes, there were cylindrical-shaped tanks containing fetuses in various stages of development. Jenny saw them. Denise saw them. Also, people in the third section of the book, women in the third section of the book, also saw these cylinders with fetuses in them. Yes.
I think this is a common phenomena. I'm not a researcher like you, but the thought occurs to me that I've seen these cylinders in Babylon 5. Leela Thompson was in one for a while from the Vorlons. And in Earth Final Conflict, that one person that was the Earthling working for as a spy was taken into one to become another race or to be, modified to operate on that planet. The thing I'm getting at, though, is this here must be something that is common. It's gotten around for these other people to be hearing about it, because you'd think the movie people would get a wind of it last.
Boy, yeah. We don't know. Yeah, we don't know what some of the movie people know and what they might not know, or where they got their information. And it's odd because some of the movies that have to do with UFOs, entities, and so forth, are so close to what happened to me and to some of the other experiencers that we
makes
wonder.
Makes you feel eerie?
Yeah, makes you wonder where they got their information or what they do know. Yeah, very strange.
And I have to tell you that Jenny had her experience where she recalled being in that room and observing those fetuses in tanks way back in 1978. And she had written it in her diary way back then. This was part of her conscious recall.
That's a ways back.
Yes.
I was going to say, though, is I think this stuff's kind of something that's been kind of like the cat let out of the bag. I know there's been reports of similar units on Earth, only they got aliens in them instead of humans in them. So my thought is, especially after reading Planet Serpo by Lynn Kasten, these people saw similar things on Planet Serpo, that this technology is being used and being leaked, and that this is why other people in the movies have it. Some of these movies you have, they probably getting leaked information that they get on purpose.
It makes you wonder. And these fluid-filled vials, I don't know about other experiencers, but I looked at them as displays of something, as displays of little entities, until one moved and the eyes opened. And I had a very emotional reaction to that, quickening.
Like it might have been your fetus?
Yes, I think it was.
Now, my thought is that this could perhaps be a form of a mechanical mother's womb.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, mm-hmm. An artificial gestational tube or sac.
Yes, and that fluid is kind of like amniotic fluid. Babies breathe in them and see in them and whatever they do before they're born. And if babies can do that in amniotic fluid, that would be an ideal fluid to fill these tubes with.
Yes, and it was so perfect that some of them that were a little further along were actually aware of what was going on, because the one I saw that opened its eyes looked directly at me, and I'll never forget that.
Yeah, that was probably pretty spooky, too.
It was. It was. But more emotional. More emotional because I felt a connection or an attachment to it right then.
But you knew you'd never be able to actually bring it home.
No, I knew that. I knew that I couldn't have it.
Well, was there any kind of depression related to this, knowing you had a baby but wouldn't be able to bring it home?
There was somewhat, yes, because I knew I had something somewhere that was mine, and I was never possibly going to see it again. see this entity grow up, see what it developed into. I knew that, yes. I know it now.
Were you given any kind of clue about what their end goal was? I mean, were they trying to clone humans or trying to create a hybrid race or a little bit of both, or any clues at all?
To make our race better, to make their race better, to preserve something. That's the impression that I got. Kathy has further information. And something else that I was told that Kathleen and I are trying to figure out. I was told clear as a bell, when we make mistakes, when there are mistakes, we give you these to raise. And no one has come back with that. Not anyone else that I know of, so we don't know what we're talking about. Are there mistakes? Do we actually give birth to some of these children? And if so, where are they? Are we raising them somewhere?
Or is the state raising them somewhere?
I don't know. I was told you get to keep them.
So that would mean maybe that the human would give birth to that child. It would be placed inside the human womb.
Yeah, but at some point, from what I understand, they always go back and remove it from the womb before birth.
Well, if they're going to keep it, if the ETs are going to keep it, they will place it in the womb, in a gestational sac, artificial gestational sac, and then they will leave it there for a certain number of weeks, and then they will remove it, and they will put it into this gestational fluid in a cylinder on the craft, and it is brought to the point where it is able to survive on its own outside the fluid on the craft. And then the human is abducted and taken on board the craft and presented with this infant. For the bonding process to take place. Because, well, we know that humans can never develop properly emotionally unless this bonding process takes place. And, so it never made sense to me thinking, well, so they're going to take the human once a month and do this bonding process. That's going to be damaging to this child. But probably the human is teaching the ETs how to do this or interact in this kind of bonding process, because we know that the ETs don't have the range of emotions that humans have. So it seems that they would have to learn this, perhaps.
Yeah, shared learning
that's
experience.
My speculation on all of it.
Now, Jenny, she's done some similar conclusions, hasn't she?
Yes. Yes, she did. Similar conclusions to Denise. She didn't have the amount of information, the amount of memories that Denise did have. Denise had undergone hypnosis. Jenny did not undergo many hypnosis sessions. She remembered most of her information consciously without hypnosis, which is highly unusual, but some people do.
Now, do you think it's possible that some of these half ET, half human hybrids are walking among us today and they've developed to a point that we wouldn't be able to tell them are different from anybody else?
I suspect that is the case. And I suspect that they have wanted to alter our developmental pattern, or perhaps our evolutionary development. And this is just my own speculation on this. But from the information that I've received from others, they've said that they were very concerned about human DNA sequences, and that if something were to threaten our species, that it could lead to the disintegration of the species due to changes in the DNA structure, and that might be caused environmentally. And so without interfering, really, they were attempting to propagate our species while they're studying us. But we also suspect that there's something in it for them